the founding president of the
Jimmy Kimmel
David
interview
Letterman
from
Club, and you had your David Letterman license plate. What were you thinking your future was going to be?
I wanted to be an artist. That was my goal.
That's right.
I'm good at drawing, and at school, that's kind of what I was known for. And
Same here.
It just seemed to be what I would do. Everyone in my family thought that is what I would do, and I thought that's what I would do. But I read Playboy magazine article. Dave was interviewed, and in that article, he said he started in radio, and I loved Howard Stern, and I thought, well, that seems like it might be fun. And I was working at a clothing store in Las Vegas, and a couple of days later, one of the guys that worked there said, hey, I work at the college radio, and you'd be funny on the radio. Do you want to do something? And I said, yeah, I'd love to do something. And I went in, had a meeting with the program director, and they had a plan for me when I got there. He said, I want you to do a half-hour show on Sunday nights and make fun of local celebrities. And I thought, well, that's great. And the first time I did it, I'm sure it was terrible. I don't have the tapes, unfortunately, but I loved it, and my whole family was listening. When I got home, that experience, which I'm sure you've had when you realize people are listening to you, is magical, and I was hooked in it. I mean, I loved it.
That's Jimmy Kimmel started on jazz radio, public radio station.
I graduated to the public toilet.
That was great. Sorry about the I guess having a
design and the outdoors,
bad
hotels, performing and visual
interview on Fresh Air on NPR. Jimmy Kimmel interview from 2013. So nothing to do with the recent unpleasantness with Trump trying to fascist cancel him. And they did a little preview of that.
Let's get back to Terry's 2013 interview with Jimmy Kimmel. The ABC late-night talk show host returned to the air this week after a brief suspension by Disney-owned ABC over some monologue remarks that became controversial.
That's one way to say it.
So you start in radio and eventually end up on late night. So
Some true things he said Donald Trump took offense at.
The one that was at 12:30 is now at 11:30. Jimmy Kimmel Live.
It was actually at midnight.
A midnight, right, after Nightline.
Right.
So
They just moved his show.
You have to figure out how you're going to be different.
2013 when they did this interview.
When you had to first figure out who are you as a late night host, like how did you figure out who you were going to be and what your trademark was?
It took a long time. One thing I did is I knew that you had to have a desk, and you had to have a couch, and you had to have a band, and that I was smart enough to know. But that's until I figured it out just to stay alive. I mean, really, every night, every day, it was like trying not to drown. Just trying to get a show on the air, trying to get guests to sit in that night. Sometimes getting good guests, sometimes getting terrible guests, and sometimes feeling very bad about myself after the show and feeling like it was a mess, and occasionally feeling like, well, that went okay, maybe I could do this. I even went through a period where I secretly hoped ABC would cancel the show because I had a lot of people relying on me, and I still do. People work on the show, and I couldn't really quit. Not that I would have, but the thought was always in my head that it would sure be great if somebody would put an end to my misery here.
What was the misery coming from? It was too hard or too much
It's a Jimmy Kimmel.
Relentless. It was relentless.
Jimmy Kimmel interview from 2013.
Acclimate to that, doing morning radio 5.5 hours a day every morning, but just the amount to which I had to rely on others was difficult for me, because when you do a talk show, you do have to rely on guests, you have to rely on people agreeing to be a part of it, and you have to ask them to go along with things, you have to ask them to participate, whereas in radio, you can do the show on your own endlessly and indefinitely. If you have somebody, that's great, but you don't need to have somebody. So that was hard for me, and it was hard to convince people to be on the show, partly I think because there was some fear that I was some kind of a monster that they imagined based on The Man Show, which is the show I did on Comedy Central. And people didn't understand that show was, that was kind of a character, it was a specific show aimed at a specific audience, and it was tongue-in-cheek.
So it must be hard to be
careful
really
with tongue in
stressed
cheek. Ask
out
Archie
because
Bunker.
of the pressures of a new show.
It's a Jimmy
And then
Kimmel
come
interview
on
from 2013.
At midnight as the relaxed midnight guy, like
Playing
the
on
day's
NPR.
over, I'm gonna like tell you some jokes and entertain you. Was it hard to be the relaxed, funny person you wanted to be after day of stress?
Weirdly, no, because the thing about doing the show is once the show starts, the work is done. So you can relax in a way. You can stop and enjoy it. If I don't know if that's the right word to use, but you can do that because everything's done. And sometimes I walk downstairs and I think we have some really funny stuff tonight, and I'm looking forward to showing it to the audience. Some nights I walk downstairs and go, all right, it's all on you, to make this funny, and you might not. And some nights I walk out and the audience is great and they give me laughs where I don't deserve them. And some nights it goes the other way. You feel like something was funny and you didn't get much response from people. And that's the nature of performing in front of a live audience, and there's nothing you can do about it. But for me, doing the show is kind of the best part of the day.
More or less right from the beginning of your show, you've had family involved with it. Your uncle, your cousin, your
Cousin
old
Sal,
friend from, I think, high school is the leader of the band on your show.
Yeah, it's my best friend since I was 9 years old. He lived across the street from me, and his dad is in the band too. But my Aunt Chippy is on the show.
And Chippy, I was gonna say
My
Mitzi.
cousin Sal
Aunt
is a
Chippy.
regular and a writer on the show. My brother's a director on the show. My fiance is the co-head writer on the show. My cousin Mickey works in the talent department. And I've got a few other relatives, not quite as close as those, sprinkled throughout the show too.
It's often exactly the opposite for people. They get to a certain level of fame, and it's not that they cut off their family, but they're in a different world than their family. But
Those are smart people.
but you've brought so much of your family into your world, and some of them are behind the scenes, some of them are in front of the camera. How did it end up that way? Why did you want to do that?
Well, first, I think I had to do that. The first person that I brought on the air was my Uncle Frank. My Uncle Frank was a cop in New York for 20 years. He worked as a security guard in Vegas for various celebrities like Frank Sinatra and every talent who come into Vegas. My Uncle Frank was a security guard at Caesars. And he was a funny character, and I got a kick out of him. And every once in a while I have him on the radio.
Thanks,
when I was
Uncle
on
Frank.
the radio, and he was always funny. And I knew that I needed someone to talk to on the air. I knew that I needed something besides me.
Thanks, gotta
and
go.
somebody to say.
Yeah, this whole interview was great. This beginning of it was
instantly,
really good.
He fit that perfectly. I had to convince
This
him. In fact,
Jimmy Kimmel
he was
interview
living
on
in New
NPR.
York, and the only reason that he moved out to take the job on the show was he found he was worried about transferring his checking account. He had a specific bank at which he had a checking account, and he found out there was one branch of the bank in LA. So he rented an apartment right near that bank, and that's what made it okay to come out.
Jimmy Kimmel speaking to Terry Gross in 2013.
Thanks, NPR. That was a
After
great
a break,
interview.
we'll
Thanks, Jimmy
continue
Kimmel.
their
You're awesome.
conversation. Also, I'll review the new Netflix drama series The House of Guinness, and Justin Chang reviews One Battle After Another, the new Paul Thomas Anderson film starring Leonardo
Well, that
DiCaprio.
reminds me, we're going to need a
I'm
military
David
coup
Cooley,
next week.
And this is Fresh.
Military generals need to coup and arrest Pete Hegseth and tell Trump his regime is over and he's free to flee the country or come get arrested. But they're going to need to coup next week at that meeting that Pete Hegseth gathers all the generals from all over the country or all over the world. They're going to need to coup. So, yep, that's what we need. We need a military coup. It's the best way to get rid of Trump because hopefully with the military coup, the smallest number of his terrorist supporters will act out. Hopefully none. It'd be great if 0 terrorist supporters of Trump act out after the military coup because they'll be like, well, it was the military. They knew the best. So anyway, I trust our military. Love our military. Hope they do their job and arrest Trump or arrest Pete Hegseth and go ahead and coup and overthrow Trump next week. So last week no, they're not. The military hates Trump. Trump's going to fire all of them, so they're going to turn around and coup. Somebody who said R.I.P. Charlie Kirk also said the military is on Trump's side. Nope, military is on America's side, and that's what's going to be proven. Pete Hegseth's going to try to get him to do a loyalty test. Pete Hegseth's going to try to do it. No, they hate Trump. All Americans hate Trump. So Pete Hegseth's going to try to get him to do a loyalty test. And it's their duty to not take an oath to Trump that betrays their oath to the country. So they're going to have to arrest Pete Hegseth at that point, and then they're going to overthrow Trump. So really looking forward to it. Thanks, military. And it's the best way to save the country, best way to end Trumpism. I mean, it'd be great if the Congress did it, but you have more Trump boutonniere terrorists acting out if the Congress did it. So it's actually better for the military to do it, and they're setting it up perfectly. So hopefully we'll overthrow them next week in the last 5 days of the Trump administration. No, it is the, Mike says you are spreading lies, but no, it is the obligation of the military to overthrow Trump.
Teenager, she was already an experienced horse handler. She then became Colorado's first woman jackpacker. Miners depended on Olga and a string of sure-footed burros to come to them high in the mountains
The
with
generals.
loads of supplies, then pack gold and silver ore out. Olga was so well regarded that the railroad extended a line all the way to her house. When one of her burros fell into a deep, snowy ravine and couldn't get out, Olga brought it hay every few days until the snow melted months later. Another winter, she found 18 miners stranded in
they work
10
for
feet of
Americans.
snow on the brink of starvation. She roped them together and took them on a 16-hour trek to safety. Her 40-year record
She
of
saved all those
bravery and
miners.
kindness to animals made her something of a legend, which lives on in Olga Little Mountain in the Las Platas.
Colorado postcard. So yeah, the generals work for the American people. Somebody said the generals work for Trump. Nope. Generals work for the American people. Trump's going to call them, Trump's going to try to get them to betray their oath to America by playing an oath to him, and they're going to coup, they're going to arrest Pete Hegseth, all the 800 generals and admirals.
Late night talk show Jimmy Kimmel Live. For most
And the
of the
generals and
20+
admirals
years
will
of
arrest
Jimmy
Pete
Kimmel
Hegseth and then
Kimmel
tell
has
Trump
been
he's done.
relatively apolitical, or
And
at
we'll all
least an
celebrate
equal opportunity
the military coup.
defender. In the early years especially, he took a lighter approach, finding delight in certain silly guests and even in family members and
See y'all later.
coworkers whose everyday personalities genuinely
Not when he's a
amused him.
traitor.
His current Jimmy
Trump's a
Kimmel
traitor. They
Live
know he's a
on-air
traitor. They're going to be
sidekick,
ready to coup.
Guillermo Rodriguez
Guillermo.
was the show's parking lot security guard when Kimmel first brought him on camera in 2003 to do security guard comedy bits with Kimmel's Uncle Frank Potenza, who also had a background as a security guard in Las Vegas and as a police officer in New York. When we left off, Terry and Jimmy Kimmel were talking about Uncle Frank.
When you told your
Everybody
Uncle
knows Trump's a
Frank that you
traitor.
wanted him to
It's
move
totally
out
obvious
and
Trump's a
be on
traitor.
camera,
You guys
be
are
a
traitors too.
character
That's why you
on
don't
our
see it.
show, how did you tell him? What
Don't
did
worry.
you
You'll
tell
see when
him?
they round him up.
He had no idea what I was talking about. I mean, he honestly had no idea what I was talking about. He was very confused. He thought he was going to be the head of security for the show, which is funny because in 20 years on the New York NYPD, he arrested only 6 people, and one was by accident. So, and these are his retirement years. But he really didn't know what to expect, and his daughters convinced him that it was a good idea. And he just stood by the door the first night, and I think the first thing we ever shot with him was we sent him to Brooklyn with Mike Tyson to see Mike Tyson's pigeons on the rooftop. And it was it's an odd piece, and it was kind of sweet, and it was funny, and that's when I knew that it was going to work.
You had him basically play a security guard.
No, well, yeah, exactly. You're right. He wasn't really doing security,
Okay.
but he was wearing a security guard uniform.
Yeah.
He
So,
So
thought
I
he
got to
was
get
doing
going. But yeah, the
security,
generals
so-
are going to overthrow.
He
did
wasn't-
he
They're going to arrest Pete Hegseth and overthrow
Yeah,
Trump
yeah,
next week.
he, you know,
Americans are
something
super
happened,
excited
he
about
would-
it. Trump boutonnieres are all
he
butthurt
would
about
try
it,
to
but
stop
you guys are
it.
traitors.
You know, there was a time
you know,
where Andy Dick
relax.
Had to be dragged off the stage.
Let it happen.
There was my Uncle Frank dragging Andy Dick off the stage.
So your Uncle Frank died in 2011. What role did he play in your life as a child?
He was